Good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar. It's a joint webinar between the public sector group at the Institute, or the Ulster Society, and the charity group. So I represent the charity group. We're delighted to have a panel of speakers with us today. We have Eileen Mullan from Strictly Boardroom, and I think most of you know Eileen. So we're very much looking forward to what she has to say about what motivates people to put themselves forward to be a non-executive director and so on, and any experiences, expectations, and responsibilities that she can enlighten us with. David Bleakney is a member of the charity group, and he's also a charity trustee with Mindfulness in Schools. So again, we're looking very much forward to hearing his experiences and insights of what it's like on the ground to be a charity trustee. There will then be a panel session after the speakers have finished. There'll be a panel session at the end, so I'd encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A box, and then the panel will comprise Eileen, David, myself, and Alison. Alison is also a member of the charity and not-for-profit group at the Ulster Society. I just have a few slides just as an introduction, really, and then a few, hopefully, websites and organisations to contact for help and assistance, because I know a number of us are charity trustees and non-executive directors, and it's always useful to share those experiences and have places to go. So just quickly, I'm going to focus on the charity piece, and Eileen will do the non-executive director public sector piece. David will then also speak about charity. So just briefly, what is a charity trustee? We all think we know what it is, but I always think it's good to go back to basics. So a charity trustees are the persons having the general control and management of the administration of a charity. They are members of the governing body by whatever name they are known and however they are appointed. And I think sometimes that is forgotten. They can also be directors of a charitable company, but you're either a charity trustee or you're not. And quite often it slips into, you know, if they're appointed or the ex officio, what are they? The charity has to decide who the trustees are. Moving on to the role of trustees and responsibilities. And again, it's good to focus on this, not just because we are charity trustees ourselves, but because as advisors, if we advise within the sector, we have to be aware of this as auditors, independent examiners, and so on. So ensure your charity is carrying out its purposes for public benefit. It's complying with your governing document and the law, and that again isn't always the case. Sometimes trustees forget to go back to the governing document to see are they permitted to take certain actions. Always act in the charity's best interest, so not your own or the employees or whatever, it's the charity. Manage resources responsibly, and that certainly has been difficult over the last couple of years, and we've had a few webinars dealing with that. Act with reasonable care and skill, and ensure that your charity is accountable, because you will be accountable not just to the board and to your stakeholders, but also obviously to the regulator in the shape of the Charity Commission. Just a wee bit in the charity's governing document. You need to understand what the charity was set up to do and its purposes, and this may change over time, but again, you need to make sure that your governing document is up to speed on that. What powers your charity has, who can be members, because there may be people who are excluded and you may run into problems there. What are the rules about meetings? What is the role of officers? How to change the governing document? So you're permitted to do that? Is that set out in your governing document? Who can vote at meetings? And obviously it may refer to other laws and regulations, but you will also have to deal with charity law, company law, health and safety, employment, and the whole gamut. So again, it's important that your governing document is up to speed. And I know a lot of charities will have revised their governing document and reviewed it when they were registering with the Charity Commission, but it's important to keep that under review. Just a wee bit on public benefit, because again, this can give people problems at times. There is no legal definition, but it's really, what is the charity set up to achieve? What is its charitable purpose? And obviously there are 11 charitable purposes set out in the Charities Act. Why is that purpose beneficial? What is the benefit? How does it benefit the public or a sufficient section of the public? Now, hopefully the charity will have demonstrated that already to the Charity Commission when they were registering, otherwise they wouldn't have been registered. But again, it's important to keep that in mind, because sometimes the public benefit that you were set up for maybe can't be fulfilled anymore. Maybe it was for a certain section of the public, which doesn't exist or whatever. So again, you need to keep that in mind. How will the charity carry out its purpose for public benefit, and is the purpose still relevant? We talked about acting in the best interest of the charity. So trustees are expected to act with integrity and put the interests of the charity before their own or any other person or organisation. And this includes the interests of any person or body responsible for appointing trustees. So again, that's quite an onerous responsibility. General duties then, acting in the charity's best interest. What is in the best interest for now and in the future? So again, you need to keep your governing document and your charitable purposes under review to make sure you're still fulfilling them. As I said earlier, not just the interests of trustees or staff, members or beneficiaries, supporters, funders or donors, and not just preserving the charity for its own sake if it's no longer fulfilling its charitable purpose. You need to make the right decisions as a charitable trustee. Those need to be within the powers. So you may want to say dispose of land, and there's perhaps nothing in your governing document that permits you to do that, or you may need to obtain permission from the commission. So you need to be aware of what decisions you can take. Are they made in good faith? Have you got all the proper information? Have you taken all the relevant factors into account? And another area that is quite topical and often causes conflict is dealing with conflicts of interest. You have to think, what would a reasonable trustee do? And there's an extra onus on us as professionally qualified trustees. We are expected to have more nous than a layperson, shall we say. So we need to be clear that what we're doing is in the best interest, and that we will be held to a higher level of account. Maybe just a wee bit on conflicts of interest, and I don't want to say too much here because I know the subsequent speakers will be talking about this, but it's important that you're aware of what they are and that you take appropriate action as a trustee and as a body of trustees. So if there are any conflicts or potential conflicts, they should be declared as soon as possible. The persons involved should withdraw from the discussion or decision making, and they may even have to withdraw from the trustee body, depending on how serious and how much this is included. You should maintain a register of trustees' interests so that any conflicts can be easily spotted and picked up before they get out of hand. And you need to agree a code of conduct for managing conflicts within your trustee body. So again, keep reviewing the governing document. And the three main words here are identify, manage, and record any conflicts. Common situations where conflicts can occur. I suppose we can split those into direct financial gain. So there's payment of trustees, and we could do a whole seminar on whether trustees can or cannot be paid. As a general rule, they should not be paid for being a trustee or fulfilling that role. There are certain exceptions if they're the only person that can give that specialist advice or whatever, but in general, they should not be paid for being trustees. Quite often conflicts arise when there's a subsidiary trading company. So if a charity is a subsidiary trading company and some of the trustees are directors of that, so which hat have you got on? Have you got your hat on as being a director of the trading sub, or have you got your hat on for being a trustee of the charity? And quite often there can be tension there, particularly if the trading sub isn't doing too well. Does the mother charity, if you like, keep subsidizing the trading sub, or does it not? And again, that can give rise to conflict. Any sale of land or any asset to a trustee, again, that needs to be done obviously at market value and all above board. And use of the trustee's property by the charity, and again, that can give rise to situations. It may be that the trustee is allowing the charity to use the property rent-free, but there could be issues around rates and so on, depending on the usage of the property and so on. So again, it's something to be alive to. There can be indirect financial gains or benefits. So the most common one, I think, is a close relative employed by the charity. And again, trustees need to be careful. And it's probably best if a close relative is employed that you shouldn't really be a trustee of that charity. Common situations where conflicts can occur is also where users are trustees. So there's nothing wrong with users of the charity being a trustee, but again, it needs to be managed carefully to make sure that conflicts don't occur. And there could be conflicts of loyalty. So if trustees are nominated by a body, or they are representative trustees, or they are ex officio, there could be conflicts with perhaps say a union if it's a governing body of a school or something like that. So again, trustees' first responsibility is to the charity, and not to the body they're representing. And sometimes that can cause issues because not everyone can deal with that. That was all I wanted to say about trustees. We could spend ages talking about the roles and responsibilities of trustees, and we're looking forward to hearing from our two speakers. I've just included some useful information of where to find help. Just on the next slide, Gary, if you have it there. So obviously the charity commissions are a good place to look. So there's the England and Wales one, our own, Oscar's the Scottish one, and then the charities regulator in the Republic. Lots of useful help and information there. And the main ones, I think, for trustees is CC3. These are available on the Charity Commission website. There's a booklet called The Essential Trustee, which you can download, which really sets out everything to do with how to become a trustee, what you need to know, what you need to think about before you even think about becoming a trustee. CC26, Charities and Risk Management, CC27, Charity Trustees and Decision Making, and CC29, Conflicts of Interest. Those are all available on the Charity Commission website to download, and they're very, very helpful if you have an issue, or even to help you to design your policies and procedures to try and avoid any issues. Some other useful places, just on the final couple of slides, the Charity Governance Code, that is very useful, perhaps maybe for larger charities, but there's quite a bit of stuff there for smaller charities. There's also the CO3, the third sector organisation, Guide to Great Governance, that has just been updated recently, and that is pretty useful, the Chief Officers of Third Sector. There's also NICFA, you'll all be familiar with, Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action. Most charities in Northern Ireland would be a member of that umbrella body, so they have a lot of good stuff, which is free. They also run courses which aren't free, but there's a lot of good stuff on their website. And the similar body across the UK, Akivo. And I realise I focused on charities, but I want to mention Eileen's Strictly Boardroom. A lot of good, useful stuff there, and Eileen's obviously always available to help. And also, again, sticking with the public sector, just in the last couple of slides, there's information on the Government Publications Code for Conduct for board members of public bodies, and also the Institute of Directors. There's good stuff available on their website, and also if you're a member, you'll have access to all their library and so on. So there's quite a bit of help out there. I don't want to take up too much time. This was just a brief introduction on the role of a charity trustee. I'm delighted now to hand over to Eileen. I'd say we all know her from Strictly Boardroom, and we've all been trained by her over the years, I think. We're really looking forward to what Eileen has to say about what would motivate you to be a non-executive director / trustee. Why would you do it, and what are the pitfalls, and what are the good things about it? So over to you, Eileen.
Okay, Rosemary, thank you for that warm welcome, and I'm delighted to be with you all today. What I'll do over the next short while is to give you a flavour about me, Eileen Mullan, and the boards that I work with currently, and the challenges and rewards as I see them. We have a Q&A session later, as Rosemary has outlined, and so if something that I say sparks an interest for you, pop your question into the Q&A box, and I would love to answer them when we get to that point. I've been involved in public service since a very early age, serving the public in my parents' fish and chip shop. I was always had an interest in volunteering and doing something meaningful. My early working career exposed me to community groups, committees, and large voluntary sector organisations who were doing something amazing every day to help others. When asking people whether they wanted salt and vinegar in their fish supper, I never expected that someone like me would be sitting as a board member as I do now. And when I say it up front to you all, public service is a wonderful gift to give and a wonderful gift to receive. My life and work is centered around board governance. And I know Rosemary's given you a snippet there, but there's three key areas. Firstly, sitting on a board as a non-executive and former trustee. Second, supporting boards to help them to be the best they can be as a governance practitioner. And thirdly, enabling our next generation of board members through the unique initiative that is Boardroom Apprentice. I'm very honoured to be the chair of the Southern Health and Social Care Trust, second largest trust here in Northern Ireland. 14,500 staff, 900 million operating budget, 268 locations, serving a population locally of 375,000. But the trust provides services regionally to all our population in Northern Ireland. I'm also the senior council member with the Healthcare Professions Council. This is a UK-wide regulator for allied health professions. 200 staff, approximately 300,000 registrants across the UK, and an operating budget of 30 million. Previously, I was chair and trustee with HNI, and that was the catalyst for me, seeing every day how by giving my time and sharing my skills that I was able to see how that impacted our older people right here in Northern Ireland. We all have something that tugs at our heart: cancer diagnosis, dementia, children in care, animal abuse, older people, mental health, and many, many others. The last couple of years none of us have walked away without being impacted on what the last 2+ years with COVID has done. But there's stuff that tugs at our hearts, stuff that always makes us stop on our tracks and think. There are thousands of charities in Northern Ireland and over 120 public bodies that operate here, all of which have a group of people who sit at a table and are accountable and responsible individuals, collectively known as the board. Those boards need individuals to come forward to serve. Those boards need individuals to come forward to share their skills and give their time and provide their lived experience to the discussions and the debates. Those boards reach out every day for people to come forward and say, hey, I would like to sit on your board. The third piece I was talking about previously was Boardroom Apprentice. And this is an eclectic collaboration with the public third and private sector. I brought my experiences of trying to get into the boardroom. I looked in many, many times and I could never see someone like me. And my experiences in the boardroom, some not so good and some very positive indeed. And we're bringing that all together to create this unique initiative that is about preparing people to serve, whether it's in a public board or indeed as a charity trustee. People rule themselves out of going forward for board positions because they have no experience, they don't know what the role entails and think they have nothing to give, and actually just think there's nothing from them that the board would want. And I would say to any of you that are sitting there at the minute wondering, I've always thought about that, but I'm not too sure it's for me. I'd like to do it, but I can't. I'd ask you to change that conversation and say, what is it that you can give? What is it you're offering? Because boards are looking for people every day, and all they're asking you for is to share your skills and give your time. When we don't know what is expected of us, it is hard to fulfill the expectations of others. We need to understand the expectations of everyone involved, your fellow board members, the chair of the board, the executive team, internal and external stakeholders. Whether it's a charity or public body, your role is the same, just in a different scale, or whether or not you're under legal duties, as Rosemary mentioned earlier. If you aspire to be a board member and are motivated and passionate about wanting to serve, then a seat at the table is within your grasp. I founded Boardroom Apprentice in 2017 as my way to provide a practical program to support people who want to serve and don't think that they can and don't know what to do. It brings together the 3 key pillars. First, by getting them experience by being with a host board for a 12-month period. That's people sitting at the table, a safe seat, learning and observing what's going on in the boardroom for a 12-month window. Second key pillar is gaining knowledge and understanding through a suite of learning days, expertly delivered by leaders in their field. And thirdly, support from a dedicated board body that hands-hold people through that year, and support from the cohort and indeed all the program contributors themselves. To date, 223 people have gone through this program, and some 80+ host boards have created that safe seat at the table. So when I talk to you about wanting to serve and you're thinking you can't, there's always a way to find out if you could. You've got to be willing and committed to being able to do that. I say being curious, having courage, and resilience are key attributes you need to be a really effective board member. Some of you might think being on a board is something you fancy doing. I say to you, it's got to be more than that. You got to want to do it. You've got to be prepared and be committed. I'd also say that the skills and talents you have are needed by boards, but don't just go into this with your finance head on. It's much more than that. Public service is about upholding the principles of public life, integrity, honesty, leadership, selflessness, and so on. It's as much about the what as the how we deliver on our role as public servants. Let me share with you some of the challenges from my perspective. The first one, staying within the board's key roles of strategy, accountability, and culture. You may all have a desire to roll up your sleeves and get stuck in operationally, but that is not what you're there to do. As a board, we need to keep looking to the future, strengthen the organization, and leaving it in a strong position beyond our time with it. Not knowing at all, there is no way that when you join a board that you can know everything about the organization. You need to get under the hood and understand the nature of the business you're now involved in. Go out and meet the teams, develop relationships with your board colleagues and staff, and this will help you contextualize the discussions and decisions that you will have in that boardroom. Time is a factor as well. If you don't have the time, you can't give it. Nothing worse than making the commitment and failing to deliver on it. You let yourself down, you let the organization down, and you let the people you're there to serve down. There's a piece on seeing the wood for the trees. There's many of you on this call like lots of information and want the finer detail before you make a decision. Others would prefer the headlines. It's really important that you get the right information as a board member to support your thinking and indeed your decision making, but you're working as part of a group. That group is the board with the senior management team. It's important that the board and the senior management team get the information right, the right level, at the right time to inform the right decision for the people that you're there to serve. Challenge and scrutiny in equal measures. A lot of people think being in the boardroom is about holding people to account. It is, but it isn't everything. There's a level of support that needs to come with that challenge function. Remember, you have a set of skills, the SMT has a set of skills. It's about pulling those skills together for the betterment of the organization and the people you serve. So challenge and scrutiny should be delivered in equal measures. And finally, there are no stupid questions. The fact that you're not employed by the organization or fully involved in what it does provides you with an opportunity to say why and what at every opportunity. Because sometimes that's how we unlock a problem with somebody who's not as close to the detail. And we just ask, why are we doing it like that? And what is the reason for this? And those help unlock further conversations. From the reward side, and there is many, and I mentioned earlier about it being a gift to serve. For me, certainly it is, and it's been a privilege for every opportunity that I've had to do it. But for me, the main rewards are playing my part in local decision making. Why shouldn't I be at the table? And why shouldn't I be contributing my skills and lived experience to the discussions and the decisions? Because those decisions impact my family, my friends, and the community I live in. So I should be involved in those discussions and sharing my lived experience. I get to be stretched every day, many of those well outside my comfort zone. And I get to work in sectors and areas of interest that are not connected to my work. I would have never got that opportunity had I stayed in one employment throughout all of my life. And I get to work with some of the most talented people and see firsthand what can be achieved when we work together for the betterment of everyone. And the last few years, certainly involved in health and social care, has really hit that home for me in terms of what our wonderful health and social care staff have done and continue to do in some of the most desperate of situations that they face. The next reward is about how you're able to see your contributions and see that they make a difference and that all voices are heard. I talked about AGNI. I could see clearly how my contributions helped AGNI shift its thinking strategically and deliver on some of those big issues that they needed to tackle for the people, older people in Northern Ireland. And I can see it in the Southern Trust, how I enable the board to deliver its work so that the senior management team can deliver on what they're there to do. And the final reward is about being a role model for others. I said that before, I looked into many boardrooms and I couldn't see someone like me. And I thought I couldn't be in the boardroom. I thought it wasn't open to me. And I thought I would never have that opportunity. But I persevered, I got on with the resilience, and I applied, and I applied, and I applied. And I trained, and I equipped myself with the knowledge. And then eventually I got that opportunity. I want others to know that they can do that too. Maybe not needing such a long journey to get there, but I want them to look in the boardroom and they could see me or see others through the Boardroom Apprentice program and know that is a place for them too. So Rosemary, that brings me to the end of my contribution. The challenges are there, the rewards are many. And I look forward to any questions that may come up for me later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. That's a very inspirational talk. Would have expected no less, mind you, but I think it's interesting to hear what the challenges are. But I think what we all want to do is give our best and make a contribution, and it's great if we can do that. So thank you, Eileen. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you. I'd like to hand on then now to David Bleakney, trustee in mindfulness in schools. Um, he is a relatively new member of the charity group at the Ulster Society. So again, David, we're very much looking forward to hearing from you and about your experiences and your pluses and minuses, if you like. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Rosemary, for the introduction, and for Eileen for your inspirational chat. You're definitely going to be a tough act to follow. As Rosemary mentioned, this afternoon, I would like to talk about my experience of becoming a first-time charity trustee. The areas I would like to cover, some of them have been echoed or will echo what Rosemary and Eileen have discussed, is motivation to be a trustee. Why would you consider it? Getting to know the charity that you might become involved with, the high-level responsibilities of a trustee. Again, there's a bit of an overlap with what Rosemary has already covered. Then getting a bit into the individual role within the board and what that may include, assuming the majority of the people attending the webinar are finance people. And then finally, signing up and embarking on your journey. I'll try and discuss these areas in general and then go into a bit of my personal experience over the last 3 years. So first of all, why be a trustee? It's really good to understand your motivation. As Eileen has already said, you need to want to do it, because this will help you continue whenever times get tough on the board. So you may feel that it is the right time for yourself, that you want to give something back to the community. You may actually feel from a personal development perspective that you're ready to take on the responsibility. There may be a particular cause or charity that you identify with or believe in that you'd like to support. Or you may even have been asked by somebody in your network that's involved with a charity, would you consider sort of applying? So from my own perspective, I wasn't actively seeking a trustee position, but was approached and encouraged to apply by a former colleague who had become CEO of the Mindfulness in Schools project, which I'll also refer to as MISP. And this is a charity set up to bring mindfulness to children and those who care for them, primarily within educational settings. I personally was drawn to the mission, which I think is the most important part, because I have a personal interest in mindfulness and try to practice meditation most days. I think probably all of us have a number of close friends or family who are teachers and have seen some of the struggles in recent years. So I was inspired by the charity's role in trying to address two of the largest issues facing education today. That is the growing crisis in children and young people's mental health, and also the issues with retention and recruitment of teachers and the impact of current working practices on their own well-being. In a personal capacity, I also viewed it as a development opportunity to learn what it is like to be on the other side of the board table in a non-executive capacity. And even though I was approached, I still had to apply and go through an interview process with the board chair and other trustees to make sure it wasn't just a tap on the shoulder. It's part of a broader process. So getting to know the charity, before you formally become a trustee, I would recommend to learn more about the charity itself. I mean, conducting a little due diligence, if you like, to understand some of the fundamental questions. So for example, why is the charity needed? What social problem is the charity trying to solve? Who are the primary beneficiaries? What are the main activities or outputs of the charity? What outcomes do these activities lead to? And then how do these outcomes coalesce into like a broader impact over the mid to longer term that addresses the original need that we have identified? Also want to look at how the charity maybe monitors and evaluates its progress and how it can use that to information to make the charity more effective. So that's all sort of a bit on the vision and mission and excuse me, understanding that side of things. But I'd also recommend, looking a little bit under the hood, what is the business model of how the charity operates? How is it funded? What overall shape is it in financially in terms of its level of reserves and that sort of thing? Hopefully a lot of this is captured in a strategy document or in the annual report or impact report. So it's worth, getting into these documents a bit and finding out about the charity. In addition, you may want to consider what phase the charity is in. Is it in a startup phase, a growth phase? Maybe it's stagnating a little bit. And then also what stage the board is at. Is it forming, storming, norming, performing? Is it a functional board? Is it a dysfunctional board? What are you coming into? So with MISP, I realized that it was already established as a sort of gold standard provider of schools mindfulness training, but it was still relatively young as a charity, and it was trying to bring a newly formed board together to produce a strategy for the coming years. I realized that it was in quite a vulnerable financial position, with the business model being what I would call in the red zone, and that is quite unpredictable income streams, but a relatively high level of fixed costs. And I think that would be common of quite a lot of charities. I think most importantly for me is before I joined, I had the opportunity to attend MISP's annual conference in 2019, which was the last one held in person. And that really helped me get a feel for the organization and, what it was about. So, I liked what I saw and I felt I could contribute to help drive the charity forward. So I decided to take the plunge. So once you've decided to become a trustee and you found a potential charity that resonates with you, it's worth making sure you are both willing and able to take on the responsibilities. Rosemary covered a lot of these, but essentially trustees collectively have overall control and responsibility for the charity. So being a trustee is serious business. You're also likely to be a director for Companies House perspective. So it's really not just about turning up every 3 months to rubber stamp some executive reports and give each other a pat on the back. The level of participation will vary among charities, with smaller charities typically needing more from their trustees. And whilst, as Eileen mentioned, we would try to keep the lines of executive and non-executive functions quite separate, with smaller charities, these can become blurred. So the primary roles, just a quick summary, Rosemary's covered these. That is, ensuring the charity is acting for the public benefit, in the best interest of its beneficiaries, and in line with its charitable objectives as defined in the governing document, making sure all appropriate laws and regulations are being adhered to, and then managing the resources of the charity effectively to give confidence that it can continue as a going concern. So I'd really recommend that you seek out resources on charities, being a charity trustee, and a lot of those Rosemary has linked in her presentation, so I'll not go over those again. There's a lot of information out there. From my perspective, I was already working in the charity sector, so I wasn't starting from scratch, but I still attended half-day courses on how to be a good trustee, on charity financial sustainability, and on charity SORP. I've also done a lot of reading around board meetings when areas have come up for discussion that I have not been so familiar with, on especially some aspects of charity governance. So, as Eileen and Rosemary both have said, while the duties and responsibilities of trustees are collective, each trustee tends to contribute in some areas more than others. Boards should select a range of trustees with a diverse skill set, ideally doing a skills audit to see if there are significant gaps in expertise with maybe finance, fundraising, governance, about the charity subject matter itself. As the finance trustee, or sometimes referred to as the treasurer, you'll sort of take the lead on the financial matters, but you always need to stress that it's joint responsibility among other board members. There may be board subcommittee involvement, e.g. audit and risk committees, investment committees, etc. In MISP, I had to get my hands a little bit dirty because it is a small charity. So I helped re-engineer the risk register. I reviewed the financial controls. I led on looking at the reserves policy, and also with another group of board members looking at impact and theory of change. A key role has also been to help other trustees when it comes to understanding financial reports that have been presented to them, whether they're management accounts, annual report, budgets, forecasting. So you really have to help educate them and bring them along with you, rather than they just say, well, David says it's okay, therefore we don't really have to worry about it. And with the individual role, I think the time requirement Eileen very much pointed out, it is, you have to make sure you have the time. It will vary depending on the charity, but I would say I've spent on average 2 to 3 hours a week in the last 3 years on MISP activities. And that's definitely higher than my original expectations. But a lot of that has to do with the COVID environment and responding to other challenges. So you've decided to become a trustee, you've got to know the charity a bit and understand your responsibilities and your role as the finance trustee. The final thing to say is to enjoy it, unless it's a really established charity with guaranteed funding sources, then it's likely to be a bit of a roller coaster. In best practice, there will be an induction plan for the new board members. But if not, it's up to you to sort of be quite proactive and get up to speed yourself. Board members can sometimes be a bit removed from charitable activities. So I would suggest to try and get some exposure to what's happening on the ground to enrich your experience as a board member and also to help you be more effective. For example, I enrolled on MISP's .breathe course, which is an introduction to mindfulness for teachers, as well as training to deliver our 4-lesson curriculum for 9 to 14-year-olds. And this helped me understand how our training courses were running and the experience of teachers and other people coming on them. As I mentioned in the motivation section, it's key to remember why you're doing it for the difficult times. MISP is in its third, period of challenge since I joined. When I arrived, we were reacting to the aftermath of a growth plan that hadn't quite materialized. Then we had COVID and had to respond quickly so we could pivot from face-to-face training to online courses and try to support our community during the difficult times. And currently we're working with a new CEO to develop our strategy and sustainable business model at a time when we believe school communities would benefit more than ever from what we have to offer, but where there are severe time and budgetary constraints on teachers and schools. So there's always something going on, but it definitely feels worthwhile. And also I've learned a lot over the last 3 years on this journey. So I would really, along with Eileen, really encourage you to consider if a trustee role may be right for you. And I also look forward to answering any questions you may have in the upcoming Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That's a warts and all of your experiences with MISP or MISP. We do have one question. I think the panel are all here. Yep, if Alison could turn on her, there we go. There's a question in the Q&A, and I know, Eileen, you alluded to this in your talk. Could you cover the balance of responsibility between an employed executive staff and board members, trustees? And are there any practical examples of areas where there can be tension between these roles? I would say probably lots.
Thank you, Rosemary, and that's a great question. So yeah, the thing to remember here is the staff that are employed in the organisation full time to deliver on certain roles and responsibilities that they're there to do, and the board is there by way of the oversight, overarching, accountable and responsible group of individuals. The easiest way I can describe it is your job as a board member is to ensure things get done, and the job of the staff are to do the things that need to get done in the way that they're supposed to get done. And that's the culture and the approach that the organization takes. Tensions do arise, and they arise because of either a unknown understanding of roles and responsibilities or a deliberately ignoring roles and responsibilities. And it's really important that there's a clear line between the board and a clear line between the executive team. You do work together. I do call our board team a team because we're made up of executive and non-executive members. We do work together and we've got collective responsibility. But that doesn't mean we don't shy away from asking the chief and the director of finance to respond to questions in relation to some of the activities and performance that they're doing. So the tensions arise by way of people not being clear on their roles and responsibilities and overstepping into other people's area. So that's the simplest way I can put it. Okay, thanks, Rosemary.
No problem.
Sorry, Rosemary, can I just add to that? I think one thing from the sort of smaller charity perspective is sort of two elements. One, the relationship between the chair and the CEO is a really quite a critical relationship, and getting that right. And also something that has popped up quite a lot in my experience is where founders are involved, and that can create a lot of tension. And founders may originally have been, you know, the CEOs, and then they're now on the board. And so there can be some quite interesting dynamics, both between the sort of chair and CEO, and then also whenever the founders are there, because they have obviously got a really, you know, it's their baby, so they sometimes can't see the wood for the trees as need to be able to step back.
Yeah, I think that's right, David. And I've seen instances where the chair and the CEO are maybe too cozy. And that's not good either, because then the other board members feel excluded or they don't know what's happening. So it is difficult to get the balance right, and the trustees operating at a higher level, a more strategic level, and not trying to get involved in operational matters. And in smaller charities, that can be very blurred lines. Okay. I don't think we have any more in the Q&A, but there is a question that was emailed to us earlier. And I think David and Eileen, you both sort of covered this, but, you know, is there one piece of advice you wish you'd had before you accepted the role as a trustee that you didn't have, but if you'd had it, it would have been useful? I don't know. We'll start with you, David. You're smiling. It looks like you've got an answer.
Well, I think the best bit of advice I had about becoming a trustee initially as a first-time trustee is only take on one at a time. You know, you'll see until you have that sort of experience or understand, you don't quite know what the involvement will be required of you as a trustee. And, you know, you've got your day job on the side. So the main thing for me was, only take on one at a time. The other thing that would have been useful, I think I still would have gone ahead, is to really not underestimate the time requirement and the commitment requirement. So, but in a way, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Absolutely. Alison, I don't know if you want to make a comment there.
Yeah, one thing I would have liked to have kind of been aware of was somebody to remind me to actually enjoy the journey. I got involved in an organisation which was very new and took it through the whole process of getting it to charitable status and taking it on, and spent 11 years working with them. And it was actually only after I left that I actually took time to sit back and realise what we as an organisation had achieved and how that had impacted on individuals and on the local community. And I also didn't, until I left, I didn't realise where I had got to individually. I had met a group of fantastic people who would never have been in my social circle at all. Guys who I now would call very good friends and can rely on. And I think that's one of the biggest things when you do get involved, is not only what you can give to the organisation, but what it can do for you. I ended up being, and apologies to anybody who's not a Man United fan, but I ended up one evening sitting in Old Trafford in the director's box with some of Northern Ireland and Man United's top football players, looking around me thinking, how on earth did I get here? So I think it's really, really important to give your utmost, but also to take time to understand the benefit that it does for you and what you're actually achieving. And, you know, you can do so much with, I started out with very, very little skills and had to learn on the fly for quite a lot of it, but I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alison. I think it is. It's a two-way thing. And yes, we can give to charities, but we also get so much from it and it enriches our lives. So good stuff. There is a question here for Eileen. How do you manage some of the potential conflicts where trustees are nominated by or involved in linked bodies, such as union reps or staff reps? I know that can be difficult.
Yeah, another great question. So with the Southern Trust, that's not the case. The board is made up of non-execs and executive directors. With the Healthcare Professionals Council, it is made up of lay members, which people like me, who is not a registrant that is regulated by the Healthcare Professionals Council. And then we have the same number of registrant members. So they're technically our customers and they're sitting at the board table. So there's no union reps. And there isn't any union reps in the Health Trust, but I know for some health organisations that would be the case. The thing to remember here is when you're appointed to the board, you might come with being a rep, but you're not there as a rep. You are now a board member and you're part of a group of people who have full responsibility and accountability for that organisation. So it's again, it's back to clarity of roles and responsibilities and ensuring that those individuals know that whilst they might have come because there's a seat maintained for somebody from either the trade union or a registrant, that when they're there, they're a board member and the expectation is this, this and this, and their roles and responsibilities is this, this and this. And that has to be called out really early on and that has to be reinforced, and that's down to the role of the chair. So with the HCPC, that we do work every year just as a reminder, and when new registrants come in, that they get to understand that they're not there to be the voice of the registrant, they're there to bring their lived experience, but they are part of a collective group.
I was involved in an educational chair, well, a university, the governing body, and that cropped up quite often. But I have to say that the trustees understood the difference, but it could be quite difficult for them when they had to go back to their members. So it was difficult for them, but as long as they recognise the conflict, I think, and we try to manage it, but it's not always easy.
Okay, well, Rosemary, listen, if I could, I would remove the term and the position of representative on any board, because we are members of the board. We're non-executive directors, or we're trustees, or we're company directors. No other title exists. So that, you know, if we could remove that, that would remove the ambiguity and always grey area for many, many people. But that's not my gift.
No, absolutely agree with you. There's one here for all of us, really. Question: would it be your experience with increasingly owners' responsibilities, oversight by the Charity Commission, etc., that attracting trustees is getting more difficult? I think the short answer is probably yes, but would someone like to pick that up with a bit more?
I'm happy to come in on this because I have a different view, Rosemary. From my experience, there's loads of people who want to serve. They just need help. They need guidance and support to do that before they're asked to take on the role. And that has been my observation for many, many years. And obviously Boardroom Apprentice is showcasing that now. People want to know what it entails. They want to get experience at a safe seat to learn on that journey, and then they're ready to go. And we're seeing the outworkings of that. First 3 cohorts of Boardroom Apprentice, 50% of them are now actively involved in boards in the public and third sector. They wouldn't have done that unless they'd done the program. So getting trustees, I can understand some charities have issues and challenges with that, but actually we need to go back to the basics here. If we want people to serve, let's help them do that. Don't expect them to jump out of bed on a Friday morning and say, here, I'm going to apply for that today because that feels the right thing to do. They've got to help them if they want to serve, and we prepare them appropriately for the role. So it's a positive experience for them and a positive experience for the organisation and indeed the community they're there to serve. That's my pitch, Rosemary.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think it depends on the sector and you know where they are, but I think you're right. There's a lot of fear out there and a lot of negative propaganda, if you like, around the Charity Commission and what's required, but there's a lot of help as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to pick up on that one?
I'll come in on that one. The organisation I worked for was a sporting charity, and it seemed to be that because your kids was involved in that, you kind of nearly got dragged into being a member of helping out and getting involved as a volunteer. But I think one of the things that we discovered was really, as Eileen has said, it's important to help those people and to give them the assistance that they need to do the role that they're doing, whether that be teaching them about GDPR, child protection, first aid, you know, and giving them those skills. And from that, one of the good things we learned was that our volunteers were actually better suited to go out into the world, into their day job, and to go out and help other organisations. We also worked a lot with the younger kids, getting them at an early stage, getting them involved in volunteering, so that they're seeing the pathway from an early stage, you know, and that they then feel that they have a part to play in the local community. And if you can get them hooked at the right stage with the right skills and get them interested, you will keep them for quite a long time.
Yep, absolutely. Another question has come in. Are boards getting more diverse in the makeup of board members and the skills being brought? Obviously, schemes like Boardroom Apprentice should help. I think that, I mean, Eileen, and when you were speaking earlier, certainly at the start you thought there was no place for you at the boardroom, and now there's place for everybody. So yeah, I think again, would you like to comment on that one?
Yeah, I think it is. We're moving. We're just not going at pace, but that will come. The more people that we prepare, the more people we all encourage. My view is every board should have a safe seat at the table for somebody to learn. Shouldn't need Boardroom Apprentice to exist to do that. We should be nurturing people to give their time and do it in a safe way. So if we want diverse people, then we need to create the space that actually diverse people can come forward, and it's a safe place for them. So they've got to see themselves in the room, they've got to see others that they can connect with, and that this isn't about gender, this isn't about sexuality, this isn't about disability, this is about just who we are, our backgrounds and our abilities or not, and what we bring to the table by way of our experience and our knowledge. And that's where we need to get to with the conversation on diversity, and not focus on that. If we focus on just purely a gender perspective, that's not helpful. But we need to create the space that actually the boardrooms are safe for people and they can get into them at any point. If it's something they want to do, then we enable them to do that. So we're getting there, Rosemary. I'm seeing the pull through from Boardroom Apprentice, which is really, really positive. You know, take that out 5 and 10 years. Let's see where it gets. But certainly we need, we have a bank of host boards there that open themselves up every year to this. Imagine if we were to do that with all the charities and all the public bodies. You know, that's about 1,450 boards that could be opened up to provide a safe space. Then we can maybe make significant inroads. But we're moving, but not at the pace that I would like.
Okay. Anyone else want to make a comment on that one?
Yep. I think, you know, there's diversity exists on many levels, you know, and whether that is the skill sets that people bring to the board, or their, you know, life experiences, or again some of the protected sort of discriminatory you know, classifications. I think it all sort of depends on, I guess, I was involved in the last round of trustee recruitment, and we got something like 40 or 50 applicants, which was just insane, you know. So then what we had done prior to that is to say, okay, we are missing these gaps on their board, we're missing people with educational experience, and we're missing people who have sort of marketing, branding type experience, and people who have meditation experience. So we were looking to increase our diversity of skill set. So that was one of our factors. But then when we started to sort of whittle down, we could bear in mind some of the other aspects. But, you know, I guess it's not all charities are that lucky. When, you know, previous rounds when we'd gone looking, we hadn't been able to track many trustees. So it's really sort of understanding what are the gaps within the board, and then really trying to reflect that in a sort of open and transparent way within your recruitment process.
I think that's a fair point. And I think it doesn't seem that long ago. I mean, now recruitment hopefully is open and transparent, but it doesn't seem that long since you got onto a public sector board with a tap on the shoulder. There was no application process, no interview process. So thankfully we've come a long way since that. But as Eileen says, we have a bit to go probably. No other in the Q&A. We have about 4 minutes to go, and there is one question that was emailed in earlier. So you're on a board and you've taken up the position. What happens if it doesn't work out? and things are a bit of a mess. Now, hopefully, you wouldn't end up that way, because if your charity or board is run properly, you should see this coming. But has anybody any experience of that, of things going a bit pear-shaped and how to get out of it?
If I may, Rosemary, I'll kickstart it, and hopefully Alison and David will come in. This comes back to our due diligence before we take on these roles. So we might be dead excited and all chuffed. Somebody said, "Hey, yes, come on, sit on the board." And in my experience, I did that. And when I got there, I was met with a flurry of activity that just told me that things weren't right. And that's where you get under the hood and you get a sense in the culture, all of that. So I had to spend quite a bit of my early time to help put things right. And all these are really valuable lessons. The important thing to remember here is that you don't work in isolation. Your board is a collective group. You got to keep your board with you and close to you. You also got to bring in the support of external experts to help you when these issues arise. Don't try to fix it all yourself. You're not the expert in everything, and your board isn't. Part of your governing structure and your articles of association will say very clearly that you can access external help at any point in time as a board member, individually and collectively. So you've got to reach out and do that. Don't be afraid of the problem. Your job is to fix it. Don't run away, because when you run away, you're leaving it for somebody else, and that's not right, because that's happened to me too many times. Fix the problem and leave the organization stronger than you got it. And that's the best thing you can do. That's my, and hopefully Alison and David can come in on that too.
I'll jump in on that one. I actually was brought in to advise initially with the organisation that I got involved with because they were in a bit of financial difficulties. They had no real control over their finances, and people were dipping into their own pockets to make sure that bills were met and that the kids got to play their game of football. So I was brought in to do that. I did end up with a little bit of a reputation being an accountant of who always said no. If you wanted something, you certainly didn't go and ask Alison, because she wanted to know the whys and the wherefores of what you wanted it for and what you were going to do with it. But having said that, one of the things that I learned very quickly, as Eileen said, I didn't know everything and I couldn't know everything. So I was able to reach out to others to help and get advice. And I found that actually, if I could bring individuals in to deal with small issues, they would get done. Whereas if I brought somebody along and said, I need you to be on the board, or I need you to take control of this, they ran away scared from it. But if they were brought in to do a small issue, they dealt with it. And it was like building blocks, as Eileen said. It was taking small items and dealing with those and getting through those situations to then build the stronger foundations and hopefully leave, as Eileen said, leave the organisation in a much stronger financial. And with mine, it was governance and finance that I worked mainly on. And, you know, we became one of the best organisations that IFA would have looked towards if they needed information. So it's small blocks in small stages. And as do what you can, but accept and ask for help when you need it.
I would say just very, very quickly, it's a bit harsh, but no charity has a right to exist. So, you know, if things aren't going well, if there's a lack of demand or funding is going in the wrong direction, then, you know, as the board, it's a responsibility to start looking at what are the alternatives. You know, is there a potential sort of merger or partnership? Maybe the charity has to close down, so you have to be prepared and, you know, have enough of a timeline in advance to consider these options. So, you know, it's not just, oh, the charity falls over, it goes bankrupt, because then, especially if you're directors of the company, that has quite a big personal impact on yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And for those who like helping out, I'm looking at you, Alison. As you know, the Charity Commission maintain a register of trustees who are willing to step in to help charities in trouble. So, you know, it's not all bad. Sometimes charities can be turned around, and we can certainly help as professional advisors. We're coming towards the end of the session, but I see just in the chat, there's a comment that should all these points made today apply equally to boards of governors of schools? As we know, these can be unique, or there can be unique circumstances regarding how people end up on boards of governors of schools. Yes, indeed, they come from all over, from parent, teacher, Department of Education reps and so on. But yes, indeed, a trustee of a body, or a governor is a trustee. And yes, it does apply. And certainly as the schools are moving towards registration with the Charity Commission, even more so. I don't think we've any more questions or burning issues, is that right? If not, I'd just like to thank Eileen, David and Alison for their contribution today and for taking part in this. I think we've all found it extremely useful and inspiring, and maybe we'll have more of these. All right, thank you all.